Hello, Radiant Leo. Welcome back to Eternal Mindfulness, where the stars speak, your soul listens, and transformation begins. Let me ask you this. What if the pain you're about to feel isn't here to break you, but to finally set you free? This video isn't just another horoscope reading. It's a divine appointment. If you've landed here right now, it's not by accident. Something deeper is unfolding. The universe has pulled you into this moment for a reason, because from May 25th to 30th, you're being prepared for a spiritual breakthrough that only your soul could have called in. You may not see it yet, but you can feel it. A quiet turbulence in your heart. A restlessness in your bones. Like something invisible is shifting, like an unseen wave is rising inside of you, and you can't quite name it, but you know it's real. That feeling is not fear. It's awakening. Over these next few days, Leo, you may be asked to walk through a fire. Not to punish you, but to purify you. Not to destroy, but to unchain you. What's coming may shake your emotional foundations. But the truth is, it's only shaking what was never meant to stay. And in its place, something far more powerful, far more you, will emerge. You see, the universe doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to liberate you. But first, it must remove what you've outgrown. And if that sounds terrifying, you're not alone. But you are ready. Because you're not just a Leo by birth. You are a soul in revolution, a heart forged in fire, a spirit designed not for survival, but for full, luminous living. So, let me ask you again. What is your soul asking to release this week? What mask are you tired of holding up? Leave a comment below and tell me, what part of you is ready to be seen, even if it scares you? And if you're feeling this energy, type, "I allow my breakthrough," in the chat, and let this be your contract with the cosmos. Before we go further, let me take a sacred pause and say, thank you for your presence. For every like, every comment, every shared moment of vulnerability that brings you closer to the Eternal Mindfulness family. Your support doesn't just fuel this channel, it breathes life into it. It allows us to keep delivering these messages that aren't just forecasts, they're awakenings. And believe me when I say this, Leo, you're going to want to stay with me until the very end of this reading. Because what the universe is about to reveal to you is nothing short of spectacular. This isn't just a story about the stars, this is a mirror for your own soul. So now, take a breath. Ground yourself. And ask yourself one simple but powerful question. What drew you here today? When everything begins to shake, when the structures you've leaned on start to crack, the mind's first instinct is to hold tighter, to resist, to panic. But resistance is not always strength. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is to allow. What feels like a sudden unraveling might, in truth, be the most precise realignment of your life. And what seems like loss may actually be the clearing needed for freedom to arrive. There are moments in your personal timeline when the universe no longer whispers, it roars. During May 25th to 30th, Leo, you may hear that roar in the form of a conversation that turns cold, a plan that falls apart, a truth that can no longer stay hidden. You might feel like the rug is being pulled from under your feet. But look closer, not with fear, but with awareness. Something in your life is not falling apart because you failed, it's falling apart because it was never meant to stay. What breaks now is only what has overstayed its purpose. The Tower in Tarot is a dramatic symbol. It represents the collapse of illusions, the breaking down of false stability. But its companion this week, the Star, promises not just hope, but healing that follows clarity. After the thunder and ash, there is a sky so open, so honest, that your soul will recognize it as home. We tend to think of growth as something linear, gentle, upward. But often, growth begins in the fall, in the letting go. Imagine a tree shedding all its leaves in autumn. To an outside observer, it may look like death. But we know it's renewal. The tree does not mourn its falling leaves. It trusts the cycle. And so must you. There is a phrase often spoken by wise teachers: only when the cup is empty can it be filled. These days may empty you of things you once thought you couldn't live without. But what if what's leaving isn't your loss, but your liberation? What if what breaks now is clearing space for the exact thing your soul has been quietly praying for? This is where you are asked to stand still in the fire without running, to allow the heat to burn away only what isn't true. Not everything that hurts you is against you. And not everything that comforts you is aligned with your growth. Sometimes, the gentlest thing the universe can do is take from you what you would never dare release on your own. You don't need to rush to fix what breaks. You don't even need to understand it all right away. Your only task right now is to stay awake within the experience, to breathe through the wave, to feel what wants to be felt, and to soften where you once clenched. This kind of shift is not about punishment or reward. It's about truth. About what wants to rise when all the pretending falls away. When a lion no longer needs the roar to feel powerful, when the power becomes quiet, centered, and real, that is when true radiance is born. So, if something this week breaks open, within or around you, pause. Breathe. And ask not, why is this happening to me, but rather, what is trying to be released through me? Because that is how freedom begins, not with control, but with surrender. Not with answers, but with presence. And it is from that presence that a new kind of light begins to rise, not the light of the old self pretending to shine, but the light of the true self, finally unburdened. When you've spent a long time pretending you're fine, the first moment of honesty can feel like collapse. But what if it's not collapse at all? What if it's release? Leo, your energy is inherently radiant. You are born under the influence of the sun, and with that comes a natural impulse to shine, to inspire, to protect, to lead. But even the sun, for all its power, knows when to set. It doesn't cling to the sky past its time. It lets go, trusting that dawn will return in its own rhythm. From May 25th to 30th, the energy around you is guiding you toward this same surrender. Not the kind of surrender that means defeat, but the kind that opens the door to something real. You've been holding an image together, the strong one, the unshaken one, the dependable one. Maybe you've smiled when you wanted to scream. Maybe you've agreed just to keep the peace. Maybe you've clung to roles or relationships that haven't honored who you're becoming. That kind of pressure builds quietly. And when it breaks, it doesn't mean you've failed. It means you've outgrown the shell you've been living in. There's a quiet wisdom that says, the more we cling, the more we suffer. And not because letting go is easy, but because what we hold on to too tightly often holds us back. This period isn't asking you to destroy yourself. It's asking you to remove what is no longer aligned, not out of resentment, but out of reverence for your truth. Think of a snake shedding its skin. The process isn't violent, it's necessary. And so is yours. Numerology whispers the number 8 into this chapter. 8, the symbol of eternal flow, of cycles and rebirth, of power reclaimed not through control, but through transformation. It is often misunderstood as merely a number tied to wealth or success, but its essence goes deeper. 8 teaches that real power begins where ego ends. When the old identity dies, the one built on performance and pleasing, what's left is not emptiness, but potential. You may feel grief as you let go of who you thought you needed to be. But grief is just a passage. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're being reassembled. And with each layer that falls away, what's underneath becomes clearer, your raw, unfiltered self, not perfect, but real. Not polished, but powerful. This is the self that doesn't seek to impress. This is the self that simply is. So write that letter. Write to the version of you that did what it had to do to survive. Thank them. Forgive them. And tell them it's okay to step aside now. You don't need to carry their weight anymore. When you burn that letter, whether physically or in your heart, do it with presence. Let each word become smoke. Let the smoke rise. Let it join the sky. And in that letting go, sense the space that opens inside you. There's a kind of stillness that follows release. Not silence as in absence, but silence as in clarity. A deep knowing that what's meant for you never requires pretending. That freedom isn't found by adding more, but by stripping away everything that isn't true. You are not losing your strength by letting go of the act. You are reclaiming it. This is not the end of your light. This is the moment it stops being for show, and starts being sacred. When something new is being born within you, it doesn't arrive fully formed. It arrives tender, quiet, and uncertain, much like a newborn taking its first breath. And just like a newborn, this version of you doesn't need to be pushed, rushed, or perfected. It simply needs to be held. Gently. With care. With patience. With reverence for the delicate and sacred nature of new beginnings. You are not just experiencing change, you are being rewoven. After everything that has fallen away, there is now space to rebuild. But not from the same old materials. Not from urgency or pressure or the need to perform. This time, you are invited to build from a deeper place. One that honors your body, your heart, your nervous system, and your capacity to breathe again. Right now, your nervous system may be sensitive. Your energy may be stretched. You might feel easily overwhelmed by noise, information, or the weight of decisions. That's not weakness, it's a sign you are opening. In moments of transition, it's natural to need more rest, more quiet, and fewer external demands. Prioritize sleep. Let your mornings be slower. Let caffeine be replaced by warm, grounding nourishment. Your body is not a machine to be fixed, it is an ally to be listened to. When you treat your physical self with kindness, your inner self begins to trust the world again. And in your work life, resist the temptation to move quickly or to prove your worth through overproduction. Big decisions can wait. Not every message needs an immediate response. Protect your peace by focusing on what is within reach. Sometimes progress looks like doing one small thing well, rather than doing everything at once. Sometimes the most powerful move is simply to pause. Financially, clarity comes when you ask, am I spending to nourish or to numb? Be mindful of choices that come from avoidance. There is no shame in comfort, but true comfort brings ease, not escape. Before you commit to anything new, ask yourself whether it honors who you're becoming, not who you've been trying to be. This is a time to invest in your wholeness, not just your image. In relationships, allow yourself to stop reaching. You are not here to rescue others at the expense of your own healing. Loving yourself is not selfish, it is foundational. When you tend to your own emotional garden, you teach others how to care for theirs. Let connection come from authenticity, not obligation. And if being alone feels uncomfortable, sit with that discomfort, not to judge it, but to learn from it. Often, what we fear in solitude is not loneliness, but the unfamiliar sound of our own voice returning. Even the visual energy around you matters. Colors can anchor you. Deep blue calms the mind, reminds you to return to your breath, to find stillness beneath the noise. Gold is the color of return to your truth, your joy, your sense of worth that is not tied to what you give others, but what you allow yourself to receive. Choose the one that resonates most, and let it guide you like a soft light in a quiet room. This is not a time for striving. It is a time for softening. For remembering that every flower blooms after its roots have rested in darkness. That healing is not a task, it's a rhythm. One you can't rush, but you can honor. So hold yourself like you would a child just learning how to walk, with patience, with awe, and with the unwavering belief that even in your gentleness, you are growing. There is a moment in every journey where the effort to be seen begins to feel heavier than the truth of simply being. Leo, you have always carried a flame inside, warm, commanding, undeniable. But even fire learns that it doesn't need to burn everything in its path to prove its existence. It can flicker gently and still light the whole room. In this season of your unfolding, you're not being asked to roar louder. You're being invited to listen more deeply. Not to others, but to yourself. The power you carry does not diminish when it softens. In fact, it becomes more magnetic. When you release the constant impulse to perform, to explain, to prove, to be more, you begin to sense something radical. You were always enough. And not enough in a metaphorical, feel-good way. Enough in a grounded, cellular, undeniable truth. You were never meant to hustle for your worth. And now, as this cycle turns, life is gently calling you out of that exhausting theater. It might feel like loss at first. Letting go often does. You might feel the grief of everything you invested into versions of yourself that weren't sustainable. You might feel the ache of trying so hard to be the sun for others while leaving your own roots parched. That sadness is not weakness. It is evidence of your awakening, not to something new, but to something original. There's a quiet teaching that says the loudest truths are often found in stillness. And the strongest leaders are those who no longer need to dominate a space, but instead embody the safety and steadiness others naturally turn to. When a lion no longer needs to roar to prove its power, it steps into a new kind of royalty, one based not on fear, but presence. The affirmations offered to you are not suggestions, they are sacred recalibrations of your identity. I don't need control. I trust. These words are not passive. They are potent. Letting go of control doesn't mean becoming indifferent, it means becoming aligned. Control exhausts. Trust expands. Similarly, I don't need to prove. I simply show up. This is not about shrinking back, this is about arriving fully, without armor, and allowing your presence to speak louder than any performance ever could. This is the time to lay down your metaphorical crown and see that you were royal without it all along. True leadership is not about ruling over, it's about rooting within. And when you begin to embody that, others feel it. They feel safer around you. They listen more intently. Not because you shout, but because you radiate a peace that can't be faked. As the month closes, you may find yourself weeping not because you're broken, but because something false inside you has finally fallen away. Tears can be cleansing, like a soft spring rain that washes dust off a long-neglected window. After the tears, everything is clearer. And in that clarity, you no longer seek the spotlight, because you've become the source of light itself. You don't need to be louder. You just need to be truer. You don't need more followers. You only need to lead yourself, gently, consistently, in the direction of what feels right. And from there, everything that's meant to come will arrive, not because you fought for it, but because you became the version of yourself who no longer had to. So let the crown rest. Let the roar soften. Let the presence deepen. And notice what rises to meet you when you are finally willing to stop proving and start allowing. That's where real power begins. Not all awakenings arrive in moments of peace. Some begin with pressure, with discomfort, with the undeniable realization that something you've been carrying no longer fits the person you are becoming. For Leo, this week holds that kind of sacred disruption, not as punishment, but as preparation. You are not being broken. You are being released from a version of yourself that was never meant to last forever. The truth is, you've always had the strength. But strength without clarity can trap you in cycles that repeat under the illusion of control. Now, the illusion is beginning to dissolve. What once defined you, titles, roles, expectations, appearances, is gently being peeled away, revealing something more essential beneath it all, your truth. Pain, as unwelcome as it often feels, is one of life's most precise teachers. It speaks clearly. It does not lie. And when pain arises not from fear or avoidance, but from shedding what no longer belongs, it becomes an ally. The discomfort you may feel this week is not the pain of destruction. It's the friction of transformation. Like a seed pushing through soil, like a muscle rebuilding after tension, growth rarely feels soft in the moment. But within it lies the light of something lasting. This is not just your healing. This is your training. Life is shaping you not only to rise, but to become a source of strength for others. You are being invited into a deeper kind of leadership, not the one that shouts from the stage, but the one that speaks from experience. Because the most powerful guides are never those who avoided the fall, they are the ones who fell, and chose to get back up with their hearts still open. You, Leo, are one of them. When the ground shifts beneath you, don't ask what you did wrong. Ask what is being made right. When people drift away, don't assume you've been abandoned. Ask what space is being created for the right connection to find you. And when tears come, let them. Not because you are fragile, but because you are being softened in the best possible way. A river cuts through rock not with force, but with persistence. Your journey is no different. There's a quiet teaching that reminds us, suffering becomes wisdom when it is witnessed and integrated. If your pain this week feels sharp, remember that you have a choice. You can carry it as a wound, or you can shape it into a torch, one that lights the way for someone else still walking in the dark. And in that act of courage, your story becomes more than survival. It becomes service. Take a moment now and ask yourself, who might be waiting for someone like me to go first? Because when you rise, you don't rise alone. Your healing ripples outward. Your insight gives others permission. Your resilience becomes proof that it's possible. Not perfect, just possible. So instead of hiding what hurts, let it breathe. Give it shape. Let it find meaning in the way you choose to carry it forward. Every scar is a sentence in the story of who you are becoming. Every time you choose love instead of fear, gentleness instead of armor, presence instead of performance, you become a beacon. And whether you know it or not, someone out there is watching. Learning. Gathering the courage to try because you dared to. Leave a yellow heart if you're ready to turn your pain into light, not just for yourself, but for every soul that crosses your path. This is your week. Not to be perfect, but to be real. And from that realness, your most beautiful power will rise. If you're still here, quietly walking with me to this final moment, then I know you weren't just looking for a prediction. You were looking for something deeper. A sign. A quiet confirmation that you're not broken, not lost, not going crazy, but that something within you is waking up. You are not weak because you feel pain. You are strong because you allow yourself to feel. You are not falling apart because you cry. You are shedding the final mask you've carried far too long. This pain you're experiencing, it's not the end. It's not failure. It's a sacred initiation. Every tear you shed this week is a seed. A seed of the version of you that's trying to be born. Not the polished, perfect version you once thought you had to become. But the honest, whole, powerful version that no longer needs to prove anything to shine. There may be moments in the coming days when it feels like everything is slipping through your fingers. You might question everything, your path, your choices, even your strength. But months from now, when you look back, you will realize this was not your breaking point. This was the moment you finally started to live from truth, not from pressure. So please, if something in this message stirred something deep inside you, if a sentence echoed what your heart has been whispering in silence, leave a comment with angel number 777 below. Let it be your way of saying, yes, I am awakening. I'm no longer just surviving, I am rising. And if you've been carrying the silent weight of trying to stay strong for too long, I want you to know you don't have to do it alone. I'm here. This community is here. Eternal mindfulness isn't just a channel, it's a family. A space for souls in transition. For hearts that have outgrown the noise. For seekers like you who are ready to come home to themselves. Thank you, truly, for your presence. For every like, every word you share in the comments, every time you hit subscribe. You're not just supporting a video. You're nourishing something much greater, a space where healing, truth, and light can be spoken freely. Your presence gives this message wings. And I don't take that lightly. So if your heart is still open, stay with me. Subscribe. Turn on your notifications. Because the universe still has so much more to reveal to you, and I promise, I'll be here to help you walk through it. And finally, Leo. This is not the end of your story. This is not a closing chapter. This is where you stop performing and start living. This is where your quiet fire becomes sacred light. And this is where the world begins to see you, not just as a lion, but as a holy flame, steady, fierce, and unforgettable. I'll see you in the next chapter. Until then, keep rising.